Donald Trump used the word genocide because he wanted the spotlight of the world to turn onto South Africa. And I thank him for doing that because we need it. There are terrible things happening in South Africa. There isn't extermination yet. There aren't farm invasions like Zimbabwe yet. But things are being put in place where it could happen just like that. So that Oval Office meeting, I think, could have gone way worse for South Africa. But it's what happens with the follow-up that really matters.
My guest on this episode of Going Rogue with Lara Logan is a man who has been making a lot of waves lately. He's no stranger to criticism, and he, in fact, puts himself out there in a big way. His name is Rob Hersov, and he is from South Africa, and comes actually from a very well-known family in South Africa, and he has a lot to say about what's been going on in the country that's been in the headlines, obviously around the Oval Office meeting, caused a lot of people in the U.S. who had not thought about South Africa, maybe never heard of it really or paid much attention to it, to suddenly start paying attention to it. The issue of the genocide of white farmers, which is somewhat controversial. People argue for it, people argue against it. But one thing, the mainstream media was united and was condemning Donald Trump for bringing white farmers to the United States. And that caused, that revived the old accusations of, white supremacy and racism towards Trump. Narratives, which, by the way, have been proven to be false so many times. I don't know what else you need. It's like, how many times you need to shoot holes in something before it doesn't exist anymore. But apparently, most of the media is not done with that accusation. So, Rob Hersov, I want to thank you for giving us your time. I know you've been doing the rounds lately. You talked to Patrick Bet-David, you talked to Dave Rubin. I don't mind getting in line. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Well, you're the first South African.
Well,
we claim you.
That's good. You can claim me. Yeah, okay. I'm an American now, but of course your heart is, for me anyway, your heart is always where you're born and raised and sort of, born of that soil, right? And forged in those fires. That's kind of the soul, the heart and soul that I still carry in me. And, for that reason, this has been a difficult interview to prepare for, because looking into your life and looking at these issues is a walk down memory lane in lots of ways. And also it forces you to face some of the reality here. When I was a young reporter and growing up in South Africa, I never for one moment thought that we would be where we are today. I know you spent 31 years outside of the country and went back in 2017, 18?
Correct.
So just tell me, how do you assess the one thing that's on Americans' minds right now is that Oval Office meeting and the surrounding issues. What was your take on that? Because ahead of time, you thought Senator Rubio was going to do quite a bit in there. He ended up doing something else that day and not even being present. But what was your assessment of how things went?
So I think it was an absolute disgrace that Cyril Ramaphosa glossed over the crucial issues that Donald Trump raised. And he brought with him, John Steenhuisen, who he calls his white agricultural minister. He should have just said his agricultural minister. And three other South Africans, white, Johan Rupert, Ernie Els, Retief Goosen. And I think it was a disgrace. I don't think they should have been there.
Why?
Because it was trying to paint a picture to Donald Trump to say, here's a billionaire, Donald, you like billionaires. Here are two golfers that you like golfers. And they're here to protect the party line of Cyril Ramaphosa, that there is no genocide, that the refugees should not be going to America, that things aren't that bad in South Africa. It's a disgrace. And I must credit Donald Trump with what he did. Firstly, he did not do a Zelensky times 10. He was actually quite measured and graceful and charming to Cyril Ramaphosa, who doesn't deserve that treatment, by the way. He deserves to get clapped. And Donald Trump's incredible team of J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, and others kept quiet. They didn't say a word. I loved Elon Musk's radar, his Death Star look at Cyril Ramaphosa. Good for Elon Musk. And we don't yet know what happened behind the scenes, but Cyril Ramaphosa went back to South Africa claiming it as a victory.
Well, he's a politician. That's what he's going to do, right?
But it upsets me because people say there is no genocide, and I want to talk about that. Why should white refugees be called refugees? It's typical left-wing lunacy. And let me talk quickly about that word genocide. Firstly, I think it was Donald Trump's master moment. 99% of the world had no idea what was going on in South Africa and frankly didn't care. But the minute Donald Trump used the word genocide, which, the leftists throw Nazi, genocide, racist at everyone. Mm-hmm. But Donald Trump played them at their own game. He used the word genocide, and the media were then flipped out and said, there is no genocide. But if you look at the definition of genocide, there are 10 elements to a genocide. Everyone thinks genocide, they think extermination. But it takes a lot of planning, process, and systematic organization before the extermination begins, and then the denial. And of the 10 features, classification, persecution, organization, there are all 10 of them. Probably 7 of them are in place in South Africa at the moment. There's definitely an economic genocide against whites, 100%. But the personal genocide is in place and could happen. And I liken South Africa today to Germany in 1933. In 1933, there were the brown shirts in bars, shouting and screaming. We have Julius Malema in his red beret, might as well just be wearing brown shirts like the Nazis, with their red berets, jumping up and down, 100,000 of them in a stadium, shouting, kill the Boer, one farmer, one bullet, da-da-da-da-da. And Julius Malema, in an interview, said, we are ready to slit the throat of whiteness, but not yet. This is live, what's going on. And Donald Trump used the word genocide because he wanted the spotlight of the world to turn onto South Africa. And I thank him for doing that because we need it. There are terrible things happening in South Africa. There isn't extermination yet. There aren't farm invasions like Zimbabwe yet. But things are being put in place where it could happen just like that. So that Oval Office meeting, I think, could have gone way worse for South Africa. But it's what happens with the follow-up that really matters.
So you covered a lot of ground there, Rob. Let's go back to different parts of what you're talking about, right? Because you are right. When you use the word genocide, it carries with it legal weight, and this is what I think a lot of people don't realize is that because the left does throw genocide around so much, they use it all the time. People forget that there is actually laws that come, there's rights that come when you're formally recognized under international law and by governments around the world as being victims of a genocide. You are now entitled to different legal options, for when you seek refuge and so on and so on. And the definition of political asylum, of course, has been tossed out the window by the left because anyone who's poor who wants to come for a better life to the United States, they should have an open door, right? According to them and the 21 million people that Biden let into this country during his administration.
Unchecked.
Right, unchecked.
Undocumented.
Most of the time. Or even, knowingly illegal, right? So on the one hand, you have this label of genocide that is used very freely. But then on the other hand, when it's used in relation to white people, there's certain words you're not allowed to use in relation to white people, like slavery. We want to forget about all the white slaves, the Irish and so on. We don't want to talk about that. And it's one of the core issues with, I think, the Afrikaans people, because you're right. Most people around the world were not paying attention to what was happening in South Africa. Most people around the world, I would say, have no idea who the Afrikaner people are. are not aware that they don't exist anywhere else in the world, that their language isn't spoken anywhere else in the world.
That they have a unique culture. They arrived in 1652. They were escaping persecution. They were Huguenots, mainly from Holland, but also from France, parts of Germany. And they were discriminated against, persecuted by the Catholics. And they escaped. And a lot of them went down to Georgia, Louisiana in the US. And a number of them went down to Cape Town. And they were the sort of founding fathers of Cape Town. And an Afrikaner means African. They are the white tribe of Africa. And they have nowhere else to go. They've 14 generations in South Africa. They are white tribe of Africa. They're not colonists. They can't rush back to Europe.
Think about it. Every dollar you spend either supports your values or works against them. And in today's economy, where you spend your money really matters. That's how we take back our country. Patriot Mobile is leading the way as America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. Switch today without sacrificing quality or service. And you'll get exceptional nationwide coverage. You know why? Because unlike other providers, Patriot Mobile utilizes all 3 major US networks. They can even add 2 numbers on 2 networks on one phone, something the big guys can't do. So stay connected with flexible, unlimited data plans, mobile hotspots, international roaming, device protection, and internet backup. Best of all, switching to Patriot Mobile supports faith, family, and freedom. And if you believe in our First and Second Amendment rights, the sanctity of life, and supporting our veterans, this is where you belong. Switching is simple. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade. Patriot Mobile's 100% US-based team will activate you in minutes. Right now, go to patriotmobile.com/Lara or call 972-PATRIOT. Get a free month of service with promo code LARA. That's LARA. Switch today. That's patriotmobile.com/Lara or call 972-PATRIOT. Centuries that they have been in South Africa, which, raises the whole issue of who does the land belong to, right? Because when you talk about land expropriation, this is a very important part of the discussion about genocide, because it's not simply, I'm sure you've had this conversation with South Africans, right? They will tell you that people all across the country are being murdered at unprecedented, just ridiculous rates. I hate the word unprecedented is overused, but when you're talking about 62, 63 murders a day.
Higher than that.
Yeah. And
85 rapes a day, and those are only the ones reported. We have one of the highest murder rates in the world. And let me give you two very specific statistics. It is 3 times more likely to be murdered as a farmer in South Africa than as a policeman in South Africa. And twice as likely to be murdered as a policeman than as a civilian. Being a farmer in South Africa is the most dangerous profession in the country. And if you take the number of farm attacks, of which 50% ended up in a murder, of which 20% involved torture and rape, and you take the number of farmers murdered in South Africa, not just white, but predominantly white, number of farmers murdered in South Africa from year 2000 to today, as a percentage of the 30,000 commercial farmers in South Africa, and you take that percentage on the 3 million commercial farmers in America, then there would have been 235,000 American farmers murdered between 2000 and today. That's the number. You don't think that's a genocide? You don't think that's horrific? And the left-wing media not only don't report it as such, but in their minds, they're probably thinking those guys deserved it. That's how sick the left is.
Well, isn't that is what a lot of people say? I mean, when you read about it online, the justification for it, even in South Africa, is that those guys deserved it, right? Because of apartheid, because of racism, because of the history. And, and we know there is a history there. I mean, there were a lot of white farmers that didn't treat their employees very well. There have been incidents of racism in the past. I know that they're relatively isolated. I mean, especially when you consider.
That's no excuse, Laura. Apartheid ended in 1994. Mm-hmm. Peaceful transition of power, white minority rule to the majority. Okay? We had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which basically said if you tell the truth, you can be forgiven. If you admit to what you did during apartheid, horrible though it is, families listening, you're forgiven. The aim was in 1994 to move forward in a unified, peaceful, coordinated manner. 31 years later, today, because the ANC has broken and stolen our country, they're kleptocrats, ineptocrats, racist, socialist, anti-American, and anti-Semitic, the ANC. And because they've failed, we have the highest unemployment rate in the world, 60% youth unemployment. Thanks to the ANC, they're so useless and destructive. 31 years later, they're now saying, we want to blame whites, colonialism, and apartheid. 31 years later, surely there's an expiration date by which you blame your ex-wife or ex-husband. Surely there's an expiration date for blaming apartheid. The blame is squarely on the shoulder of the ANC and Cyril Ramaphosa.
So I understand why you say that. I mean, I'm a white South African, so as much as anybody, if every white South African benefited from white privilege, you and I both benefited from white privilege. We can't change the past. And that doesn't change the fact that I've worked all my life and I've given back everything that I have. I know you've worked hard, your family worked hard, but your family has a history in South Africa. You've often said you were born into privilege, right? That you were born into a wealthy family and that you've made the most of it, right? You've done everything that you can.
You did your homework.
So, but I would just like to know, I mean, I asked a lot of people in South Africa about you, and a lot of people know you and a lot of people respect you greatly. But the one thing that people asked me was, he doesn't ever really acknowledge how much his family benefited. And when you look at the history of mining in South Africa, the history, the mines played an integral part in the struggle. The way black people were housed on the mines in the hostels, which ended up being hotbeds of violence. The way the migrant labor system worked, where people would cycle in and out and they would get paid low wages and then store up their money and then go back to their homelands. And you had this constant cycle of unskilled labor that allowed the mines to be very profitable. So, one of the things is just that people asked me to ask you is, how do you feel about that history? And would you acknowledge that? And what do you feel that you owe for that?
I owe nothing. I owe nothing. Our family were immigrants. They came out from Eastern Europe and Russia. They had no benefits. They were not loved by anyone in South Africa. They had to fend for themselves and my grandfather and my father built an extraordinary mining industrial business. And if people say it's on the back of black labor, I mean, can I swear on your show?
Yeah, sure. You can do whatever you want.
BS. That's BS. We had to compete with the Afrikaners, the Anglos, everyone else to build. We got no benefits whatsoever. And this concept of white privilege, I mean, come on, it's a leftist construct and it's rubbish. Apartheid, we voted against apartheid. We fought against apartheid openly. You can see our family with other families, mostly Anglo families or of Jewish extraction, in parliament, in civic society, and on the street. Okay, and in the end, apartheid was removed in 1994. And yet now we're discriminated against by a racist ANC. Do you know since 1994, 114 anti-white and anti-colored and anti-Indian race-based laws, call them for what they are, racist laws, have been put in place. The ANC has turned into the new apartheid. But the big difference between the two is, at least under the Afrikaners, they knew how to run the Electricity Supply Commission, the water, the roads. Things were built. Universities were created. Under the ANC, nothing has been built, nothing has been created, and everything has been broken. These people are not just malevolent, they're morons.
Well, yes, that's something that one South African said to me is, you have corruption in every government in the world. So corruption is not, I mean, it's a huge problem. But if you had corruption with competence, the country wouldn't be coming apart at the seams.
If the ANC had half a brain, Cyril Ramaphosa, Zuma, and all those people, they would continue allowing the economy to thrive so they could steal more and for longer. But they're so greedy and so stupid, they've broken everything. South African Airways, bankrupt. Eskom, Electricity Supply Commission, we get 4 to 6 hours a day of no electricity. There's raw sewage in the streets. The sewage into the water outside Durban, people can't swim. And the ANC it's such an embarrassment. And because under Mandela, South Africa was this miracle democracy, the Western world, we solved South Africa, peaceful transition from white minority rule to democracy. Wow, we did the job. Let's go look at another country and see what we can do there. And under Mandela and Mbeki, everything worked fine because Mandela stood like a giant, striding over the communist manifesto of the ANC. He didn't allow any of that to disrupt 3, 4, 5% economic growth, jobs being created, things being built. But the minute he and Mbeki left, the rot set in under Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa. And the country
Zuma was bad,
has
Rob.
deindustrialized.
I want to ask you, though, you say that, and I know what you're talking about. I mean, obviously, I was there during the 94 elections. I was there during the beginning of the end of apartheid. I was there when Mandela was there, and I knew Mandela as a journalist. But you remember the arms deal that was made when Mandela was still in office. One of the very first things that happened after 94 was this massive arms deal with French companies and all the others. And everybody kind of got a piece of it. It's been well documented now. It's been fleshed out in the courts. There was a massive arms deal that the South African government got involved in. And there were people in the ANC that were taking their cut. And it was in part because you didn't have a violent, bloody civil war, because you had a peaceful transition of power. One of the things that happened was that all of these people who gave up their education, right? Because remember the slogan of the ANC and the UDF, the United Democratic Front, was liberation before education. So they were asked to put their education and put everything aside. And then in the wake of 94, what happened overnight was that all those people went from being part of a noble struggle for freedom to just being poverty-stricken with no skills and barely employable.
And those people were put into government.
Right now, somewhere in Nigeria, there's a Christian family being persecuted. Those who are not killed are often forced to flee their homes just because they believe in our Savior, Jesus Christ. At Equipping the Persecuted, they're committed to reaching every affected area to find these people and help heal the deep physical and emotional wounds that have been inflicted upon them. But they can't help them without your support. So please visit equippingthepersecuted.org and donate today. Sign up for just $35 a month. It's a little over $1 a day, and you'll help rescue Christians who are suffering and provide security, medical care, food, shelter, and love. The situation is urgent, so I'm asking you to join in the next 10 minutes. And if you do, they'll send you a special thank you gift. If you're wondering if your support will make a difference, I can tell you that it will. And if you've ever thought about helping, this is the time. It's a life of fear and danger for these Christians, but for just over $1 a day, you can change everything. It could be the most important thing you do today. Go online to equippingthepersecuted.org and make a difference in the life of a persecuted Christian. That's www.equippingthepersecuted.org. Yes.
So we basically had a government of fundamentally stupid, uneducated people, which has continued to today. Look at
some
Gwede
stupid, some not.
Gwede Mantashe, the Minister of Mines. He's a communist. Fikile Mbalula, who's one of the two candidates to replace Cyril Ramaphosa, he's thick as they come. I mean, I wouldn't hire him. He's probably got a standard 6, which is a 14-year-old education. He's thick. He's dumb. These are the people running the country.
Well, because of nepotism, right? Because they're putting in loyalists as opposed to people who are qualified.
Right. Exactly right.
But you touched on something important there, when you said he's a communist. Well, we know the roots, of the ANC, the people who were bankrolling the ANC in the old days. It was the communists and the Marxists. And it's really no different today. Look at what China has done all across Africa. South Africa's no exception. But it's this alliance of the leftists, progressives, globalists, is sort of elitist mindset with the Marxists that you really are seeing play out in South Africa today.
That's who we're up against, and it gets worse than that. Iran. Mm-hmm. So we all know who the Iran proxies are. Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, and the ANC. Iran has been sending money to the ANC, and in return, the ANC takes the ICJ case against Israel. Has anyone thought, why would South Africa do that? Because they're being bribed by Iran. They're prostitutes. They'll take money from the bad guys and then do their bidding.
Well, the ANC got itself into financial trouble, right? Iran came in and bailed them out with millions because they hadn't paid their tax bill.
And Cyril Ramaphosa, our president, spineless Cyril, was caught with millions of dollars hidden in his sofa. And we've not been able to, because most of the judiciary has been captured by the government, we've not been able to pin him down on where that came from. I'm sure it came from Iran. He got bribed too. He's as much a criminal as anyone else in his government.
Well, Cyril Ramaphosa he went to work for Anglo, right? I mean, after the transition. He didn't go into the government. And he was wealthy before he came into the government. He's also responsible for letting Jacob Zuma out of prison on the false idea that Jacob Zuma, the former president of South Africa, was dying of this terminal illness.
Have you seen Jacob run up onto a stage lately?
Yes.
God, he's had a good recovery. How did that happen?
Well, you wonder if Cyril regrets letting him out of prison because now he's head of MK, which is the other opposition party, which appears to have more popularity than Julius Malema, but I mean that's what people say.
It does. So the most popular politician in South Africa is a toss-up between Jacob Gangster Zuma and an amazing man called Gayton McKenzie, who's the current Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture. But if you take those two and you add the smartest political tactician in South Africa, you get Helen Zille, who's the quarterback behind the Democratic Alliance. Those three are the political lions of South Africa. And where does Cyril appear? He's not even on the list. I mean, he's a sock puppet. Don't get me on that.
So, okay, let's talk. I mean, because people are here, what do they care about when it comes to South Africa? They care about this issue of understanding what is the truth. I mean, Donald Trump got hammered. They said the pictures that he showed, one of the pictures came from another country. They said that the crosses which marked a memorial were not a mass gravesite, and he got all that stuff wrong. So
let me talk you through that.
The media here, of course, used that to deflect away from the core issue, which is that every cross in that video represented a dead farmer.
Donald Trump does get some things wrong, but the message is right. So the crosses were not graves. The crosses were representation of every single farmer that has been killed.
That's right.
Put over this huge area with these hills. It's like going to the Holocaust Museum or the Genocide Museum in Rwanda. You go there and it's impossible to say anything, and you've got tears in your eyes. It's the most scary, depressing. These farmers, isolated, get attacked. Maybe a wife, a husband, some kids, maybe an uncle or a cousin, defending themselves against these people that come in and rape and torture, and murder. So he said there were graves. There were not graves, but there are all of those graves all over South Africa. These were the Plaasmoord Kopie. This is the hills to remind people of the farm murders, and they're representations of the deaths.
Well, they were also created because the media denies that the farm murders are happening. Right? I mean,
it's true. I can send you the facts, the statistics. They have all happened. The media is insane. Donald Trump also held up an article about Congolese issues, but within the article, there was very much paragraphs about South Africa, about the farm murders, and about the movement towards a genocide represented in there. So that article wasn't specific to South Africa. Those crosses weren't graves, but his message was 100% right.
Yes, and he wouldn't have to do that. You know, a lot of people talked about the tactics, the ambush, right? But he wouldn't have to do that. He wouldn't have to play a video and show evidence if people were just honest about the fact that these murders are happening.
And, you know, the people in Cyril's group glossed over that. Only Retief Goosen, the golfer, the famous golfer,
yes,
said to Donald Trump, my family are farmers and they have been attacked before. He told the story. And, you know, Johan Rupert basically said, I sleep with my door of my room open. But, I mean, he has hundreds of millions of rands of security around his house.
Of course.
And he doesn't even live in South Africa. He lives in London. I mean, why would he say that?
So, okay, you know, one other thing to raise here is obviously in South Africa, there's an extreme level of violence and criminality. And what people who do acknowledge that farmers have been killed, what they want, how they present the argument is they say, well, you know, this isn't a race issue. This is a crime issue, right? South Africa has a crime problem. And the vast majority of people who are killed in South Africa in burglaries and, you know, in everyday crime are Black people. And that by focusing on the white farmers, you're doing that because you're racist.
South Africa has a huge crime problem. Who's to blame for that? The ANC. They've defunded the police. Our army is pathetic. They have made no effort whatsoever to protect the farmers. And of the murders, 20% are rape and torture. To rape and torture someone, there has to be a huge amount of hatred. You're not just there for economic crimes. Show me where the guns are. Show me where the money is. It's a punishment. It's a punishment of hate, and that's racist. The farmers are hugely productive. Why are they being targeted? Because the EFF are jumping up and down in a stadium with hate speech, saying, kill the Boer, kill the settler, one bullet, slit the throat of whiteness. And every time they do that, farm attacks peak. So there's a direct link to that hate speech and racial crimes. And here's where Cyril Ramaphosa is a coward and a disgrace. He glosses over it. And, you know, Donald Trump said in America, anyone who stood up saying those hateful things would be arrested. Why haven't you arrested Julius Malema?
Well, that is a good question. Why haven't they arrested Julius Malema?
Because they're cowards and they are happy for it to continue. They're racists. See, here's the interesting thing. The left conquered it in their heads that Black people can be racist against white people.
Well, they changed the definition of racism. They said, in fact, you can't be. That's what whole DEI and this whole leftist ideology is about. They actually rewrote the definition to say that racism can only be white people towards, you know, other races.
Well, come and have a look in South Africa. There are a lot of Black racists coming out of the woodwork or being blatant about their racism. And I'll give you a little example. I was one of the very first, and I'm probably one of the only businessmen in South Africa standing up, calling out the ANC, telling the truth, and even calling out Julius Malema and Jacob Zuma. Unafraid. I tell it like it is. You tell me another businessman that's saying what I'm saying. None. Zero. They're either cowards, colluders, or they've been captured by the state. I mean, the fact that Adrian Gore and Johan Rupert were actually at the White House meeting I don't know why they were there. Were they trying to say everything's okay in South Africa? Were they trying to defend Cyril? Why were they there? And it makes me sick, really, how many black podcasters, since I've been speaking out loud, their underlying anti-white racism is bubbling to the surface. It's just coming out. Now, a lot, the vast majority of black people in South Africa are not racist, do not hate white people. And they want what we want, which is a better world, a better South Africa, and a greater future for their children. 88% are Christian. The vast majority of people want the same thing. But the ANC, through malevolence and complete incompetence, have destroyed the economy and put 28 million people, population of 60 million, on completely dependent on social grants. Now, it takes complete evil or stupidity to destroy an economy, deindustrialize an economy, and force so many people to be reliant on social grant. But if you think about it cleverly, it's the Soviet playbook in action.
It's Marxism. That's what it is.
Correct. Keep them poor, keep them reliant on you, keep them voting for you.
Yes, I mean, the 61, 62% unemployment among young people. If most of those people will never get a job in their entire life. They're going to school. Some of them are getting degrees. I know people who have come out of university, black South Africans, gotten a degree at great cost to themselves, and have never, ever been able to get a job.
Yeah. And then there are white kids who graduate from school or university and can't get jobs because there are rules against hiring white people.
Yeah, and you mentioned the laws, right? You said there's all these laws, and then of course there's a bunch of articles where people counter that and say this is not true, and these laws come from AfriForum, and AfriForum is a racist white organization, and that these laws, when you actually look at them, do not mention race. But of course, they mention all these things like diversity and inclusion and equity. That are all these Marxist buzzwords, right? And the way those laws end up being interpreted and the way that they're used is based on race. Now, the counter to that is that a lot of people will say to you, well, 62% of top managers in South Africa are still white, and the vast majority of the land and the vast majority of the wealth is still in the hands of white people. But they quote those statistics without mentioning the fact that the tax base in South Africa comes from roughly 5 million people, most of whom are white, and that most of they're talking about arable land, which is the land which is farmed.
22%.
Right, farmland. So okay, give us those statistics. Help put that in perspective for people.
So 7% of the population are white, and another 7% are colored and Indian. And Americans get a bit confused by the word colored. Colored in South Africa means the child of a white person and a black person. And it could be any
descendants from the Khoi, right? Because from the Bushmen, are colored people. They have their own identity. They have their own culture. And in fact, a lot of colored people have written to me and said, how come you guys never talk about us? You always leave us out of the conversation. But we're also a minority. The Khoi, the descendants of the Bushmen, particularly in the Western Cape, these are also minorities in South Africa.
But they're a minority of a minority. The main colored population are direct descendants of the Malays from Malaysia that came very early, and the white settlers, and then more recently it's been the black tribes with white Africans, and I think the colored population is about the same or a little bit larger than the white population. So let's call it, and then the Indian population, the descendants from India, who many have been many generations in South Africa. Probably those three groups make up 15, 16, 17% of the country. The rest are the black tribes, and there are 26 different black tribes. So it's a complicated country with culture, ethnicity, pigmentation. But to say that, because the white population is 7%, but 62% of chief executives are white and mainly male, that's wrong, and we've got to change things around. I mean, that's just fuzzy. That's typical leftist fuzzy thinking. Doesn't make sense.
Why are so many young people struggling to have babies today? Birth rates in the US are at record lows, and that's partly because testosterone levels are dropping all the time. According to some studies, T levels are roughly half of what they were 50 years ago. And if we don't reverse this trend, we could be looking at population collapse. And it's why we partnered with CHOQ. They're a Patriot-owned supplement company, and their mission is to save mankind from extinction. They have something called the Male Vitality Stack, and it's been shown in clinical trials to boost your free testosterone by 87% in just 21 days. That is not just a statistic. You will feel it. And ladies, you'll be pleased to know it's not just for men. The Female Vitality Stack addresses just about every complaint a woman can have: stress, mood, hormones, energy, and focus. And it'll even help you keep up with your man. So go to CHOQ.com and use code LARA for 17.76% off your subscription. Cancel anytime. Or you can also call 50-CHOQ 3000 and tell them Lara sent you. And then what about the farmland?
So 22% of the arable land is owned by the white population, and they're large farms and very productive, and they feed the country. But here's the horrific statistic. The vast majority of land that has been transferred or sold to black farmers they've not been given the title deeds. The government has held back giving them the title deeds. So these are people that own the land, farm the land, but they haven't got the title deed yet. And the government, it's malevolent. So the government is basically saying, we control you. It's complete evil. And, your poor viewers, Lara, they're going to be saying, hopeless. I mean, I've only told you 10% of the terrible things that are happening in South Africa. There are 1 million South Africans that have left the country. 1 million. The two richest people in Los Angeles, number one and number two, are South African born. There are $25 billionaires in America born in South Africa. I mean, there's talent and success on South Africans overseas, and they're not coming back. You know why they're not coming back? Because they don't think South Africa stands a chance.
But you do.
I'm 4 out of 10, but I'm prepared to fight for it. I lived 31 years overseas. I missed my country. I went home. My New Zealand wife said to me, I fucking love this place. I really love this place. It's worth fighting for. And I said, okay, I'm going to fight for it. And they can carry me out in a box. And I'm not going to be like other businessmen in South Africa who just keep quiet, too scared to rock the boat. I'm telling it like it is, regardless of the risk, because I don't have to do this. I'm wealthy enough to get up, be the last chopper out of Saigon, and live anywhere else in the world. I have more than enough money overseas. I don't need to do this. And people ask me, why are you doing it? And why I'm doing it is my father called me one day when I was at my lowest period. I was getting death threats and people were cutting me off, wouldn't speak to me. And a family member of mine said, why the hell are you doing this? And my father said to me, I've never been more proud of you for doing and saying what other people can't afford to do and say. And for the last week, I've been on some American podcasts, and I've had hundreds and hundreds of messages and WhatsApps and emails saying, thank you, Rob, for bringing a light on South Africa and giving us a voice. And that's why I'm doing it.
Rob, that is one of the things that people said to me, is that Rob Hersov is hopeful. That the main reason people in South Africa, obviously a lot of white people, but middle-class people really, what you mean to them is that when the situation seems to be so hopeless, that you give them hope.
It is until Donald Trump shined his spotlight on South Africa, my view is that South Africa had no chance. 3 out of 10. It's the democracy is moving in the right direction, but slowly. The ANC voters are beginning to leave the ANC, but they're not quite comfortable to vote for the Democratic Alliance, the party that I support. So
and for people who don't know, the Democratic Alliance is still large. I mean, it's mixed race, black and white, but it has a huge white representation. And when you talk about the ANC, the African National Congress is the ruling party. I just want to make sure people understand that.
So the ANC, the ruling party, Nelson Mandela's party, now run by these thugs, gangsters, and clowns like Cyril Ramaphosa, had dominated South African politics for 30 years, always had more than 50%. But in May 2024, they dropped to 41% because voters are realizing the ANC is a destructive evil force. And the Democratic Alliance, remember, whites are only 7% of the country. Democratic Alliance got 21%. So a lot of the voters are non-white. So the ANC formed a coalition government called the GNU, Government National Unity. GNU. And they're 40%, the DA, and the DA is 21%, gave them 60%, but then they added a whole bunch of other little parties. And this is a sort of coalition government. And South Africa will be a coalition country for the long term. No one's ever going to get above 50%. And it's kind of working its way out. The ANC are still arrogant, trying to push through racist laws, socialist laws, but at last, the coalition partners are standing up and saying, no, we don't agree to that. So democracy is working slowly. The voters are not stupid, but it's like the ANC, Mandela saved our lives.
Well, it's an emotional thing from the revolution. And, and I was there in that time. I know a lot of people who criticize you say, well, what does he know? He wasn't even around for 31 years. And I think it is something that the ANC has to grapple with, right? How they let go of this revolutionary sort of fantasy and romanticism, right, about it. Because that's why Jacob Zuma, it's one of the reasons the Zuma family is so powerful, even though they have been shown day after day after day to have plundered the country. Jacob Zuma building himself a massive complex with his own hospital on money stolen from the taxpayer, going to jail for his crimes, and now running again for office and being a real threat, actually, to Cyril Ramaphosa, potentially. And, and certainly on the ANC's power base. So you have all of this, and then you have this is the same excuse for why they tolerate Julius Malema, basically singing "Kill the Farmer, Kill the Boer," is because that this song represents something emotional in the revolutionary ideology and history of South Africa. And I remember what that was like, being in those stadiums with 150,000 people, and you literally, it was to inspire, and it was, and what they will say, everyone from Thabo Mbeki, who was another former president, what they will all say is that this is not meant to be taken literally, that this was a song of the revolution to inspire. Yeah, easy to say.
That's easy to say. If that happened in America, that person would be arrested.
Oh, if white people were chanting for the death of black people in South Africa, they would be arrested.
Correct.
It's only because it applies one way that it's condoned.
It's disgusting. And, I can leave the country anytime. I can pack my bags and go. But walking around on the streets are millions of people that have no option whatsoever. They are on the Titanic and they're in the lower floor. They're not even near the lifeboats. They have no chance. They have no chance. South Africa is on the edge of the abyss. The economy is going to collapse. I mean, the ANC know how to break, steal, and spend. They don't know how to invest. They don't know how to grow. We have 1% economic growth and have had for about 10 years, and 2% population growth. Yes. We get poorer every year. We have more rail line than the rest of Africa put together, and none of it works. The ANC's broken the whole rail system. So all the goods that get transported are on the highway. And if you drive from Durban to Johannesburg, it's a 4-lane highway in some places, 3 lanes with lorries. I mean, it's falling apart. Potholes in the streets, sewage. Well done, ANC. You've destroyed a country.
Well, and also by turning off the electricity for hours every day, and by now turning off the water, now they're talking about water shedding. And when they turn it back on and it rushes through these pipes that have been neglected, infrastructure that's been neglected, this is when it bursts. But Rob, I feel bad because we're painting a sort of a very dark, very bleak picture of South Africa. And as you know, direct foreign investment has been falling off dramatically over the last few years, and that has had a profound impact on the South African economy and on the jobs that are available. And we're not doing anything to help that right now.
So, Laura, let me finish on one more depressing thing, and then let's talk about the good, shall we?
Sure.
So, Cyril Ramaphosa signed into law in January these 3 words: expropriation without compensation.
Yes.
Why would anyone in America or anywhere in the world invest in South Africa when you have expropriation without compensation hanging over your head?
They wouldn't, and that's what you're seeing in the
massive
statistics.
Overregulation and black economic empowerment. I'm sorry, it's just...
Well, and black economic empowerment forces you to give 30% of your company to a black South African, right? Not any South African, but a black South African.
That's racist. That's not DI, that's racism. So South Africa is uninvestable. Americans don't invest until this ANC government repeals EWC, black economic empowerment, withdraws its case against Israel. You would be crazy to invest in South Africa.
But look, those things are not going to happen, Rob.
I don't know. If Marco Rubio, behind the scenes, and JD Vance, and Congressman Ronnie Jackson, shout out to him.
Mm-hmm. He's a friend of mine.
Okay, well, please tell him I'm a big admirer. I'd like to meet him. If they get behind the bill that's going to Congress and the Senate to put sanctions on individuals, starting with Cyril Ramaphosa, I'll give you a long list of them. Julius Malema, Jacob Zuma, Naledi Pandor, the anti-Semite.
And Julius Malema is the controversial leader of the Economic Freedom Front, who is the Marxist leader who goes out there and leads people in this chant. And who has also refused to rule out calling for the slaughter of all white people at some date in the future, should he need to do that.
Correct. So, Ronnie Jackson, if you hear me, and Laura, please send this to him, get that bill through and target these monsters, because they only understand force. Most South African corporates are like, if we're nice to Cyril, maybe he'll do the right thing. He laughs at them. They only understand force, and the only force we can really bring to bear is America and sanctions on those individuals.
Okay, but now you're talking about the strategic game that's taking place in South Africa, right? Because we all know what's really behind South Africa's move at the International Criminal Court. I mean, as you pointed out, the white Jewish people in South Africa were a very big part of the struggle against apartheid.
Yes.
And now they're allies in the ANC. These people were brothers, Ronnie Kasrils, right? And you look at all those people.
Joe Slovo.
Yes, even the man who wrote, who when Mandela left prison, he went and stayed with a friend of his, a longtime friend, who was a white Jewish South African. That's where he was when he wrote his book, Long Walk to Freedom. I mean, so it's, it's quite something to see South Africa taking the position that it's taking. Yeah. But the game that's really playing out there is the Iran, China, Russia, the BRICS nations. Yeah. This is all connected to what's playing out in the United States. And you often refer to the fact that Jacob Zuma, when he became president of South Africa in 2008, that's really when the country went down the tubes. I would argue that the infrastructure was already being neglected and there was nepotism and corruption already. However, there's something else that happened in 2008, which was the election of Obama in this country. And who did Obama send to be his ambassador in South Africa? Patrick Gaspard, who was a Haitian man, who was very outspoken. You talked about the expropriation law that was passed and became law in South Africa in January. Well, that was a discussion a number of years ago. That law was meant to be passed long before COVID. And the man who was out there in public on the international stage and nationally in South Africa, encouraging the expropriation of land without compensation, was the United States ambassador, Patrick Gaspard.
He should be hung, drawn, and quartered. End of story.
Well, at the end of Obama's term, he was rewarded by George Soros and made president of the Open Society Foundation.
You're mentioning three horrific names: Obama, Soros, and Gaspard. I mean, how does the Western world produce lunatics, monsters, and demons like those three, including Obama, even though he looked nice in a suit?
The legacy, though, is still, that's what you're looking at in South Africa, right? The language of DEI that you hear all over the world, the Marxist rhetoric that you see. I mean, Julius Malema may be self-made and self-educated.
And you sent us CRT. You sent us CRT, you Americans. It's infected our schools too.
That's right. That's right. Critical race theory, which is what redefined racism. But
let's just have a quick positive about South Africa. Let's try to end on a positive note. Okay.
Well, just before we go to that, just before we go to the positive note, Rob, let's figure out who's really the money in South Africa. Who's really pushing and driving this?
Pushing what? Sorry.
Well, pushing all this ideology. Who's pushing? I know Iran has a hand there. I know China has a hand there. But the Open Society Foundation, you know, they had an office in Johannesburg. They were a big part of the revolution in South Africa. And they still have a strong presence. And the ideology that they espouse there is stronger today than it ever was even back then.
So because the ANC doctrine was written in Soviet times and is being implemented, you know, they play a long game. They infect the universities, they infect the schools, they infect the legal system, they infect the media. And it's very well played out in South Africa right now. And all the George Soroses and Obamas need to do is give it a little bit of a push or not say anything and let it get on with itself. And then you have corporate South Africa saying nothing. Most of these state institutions being captured, it's a great word, by the ANC. You know, they put these demons in charge of all of these places. Then you have DEI. Then you have all of these, you know, laws, policies, regulations, initiatives. And suddenly we wake up now and realize we're being boiled like a frog in a pot. And that is what's happening until your new administration said, we see what's happening and we're going to point it out to the world. We'd be finished if that meeting in the White House hadn't taken place last week. It'd be over.
So what is the positive then?
The positive is I don't want to leave the country because it is the most beautiful country in the world. And I don't say it lightly. Anyone who's been there, I mean, if you take Sydney, San Francisco, what's another beautiful city? Miami, smash them together. Cape Town's 10 times more magnificent than all three put together. The people are more fun, crazy, amusing, interesting, beautiful. I mean, we've got such, you know, we've got animals, we've got wine route, we've got, you know, if you go up the east coast of Australia, that beach is the same all the way up. It's boring as hell. If you go to New Zealand, it's beautiful. Oh my God, I lost 5 days. It's so boring. South Africa has madness, danger, beauty, fun, everything. I love it. It's the greatest country on the planet. I don't want to leave it. And I'm going to fight for it.
What would you say then to people who, why go to South Africa? Why travel all that way across the world and spend all that money if there's racism there and everything's falling apart? What would be the point?
Come see it. You ain't seen nothing yet. It is beyond magnificent.
Do you remember Dr. Ian Player, the famous South African who actually wrote
I knew Ian Player, and I know Gary Player very well. I saw Gary in Miami last week. They are national treasures and national heroes.
So you know what, Dr.
My wife's calling on the other line. Yeah. Hello, darling. I'm just on the Lara Logan show. I'll call you right back. You're now live on the Lara Logan show. I'll call you back. I have to take those calls.
You do.
Look, the players are national treasures. South Africa produces wonderful people of all shapes, sizes, and pigments. Look, come visit, decide for yourselves, but I wouldn't jump up and down to invest if I was an American. Sorry to say it. We got to fix the country. Then you can invest. It'll take off like a rocket.
Well, what Dr. Playa said to me, I asked him that question probably more than 20 years ago. And Dr. Playa, he wrote the Warsaw Convention that is really the basis of conservation worldwide. He was an incredible man. And I asked him that same question, why should anyone come to South Africa? And he said, this is your home. This was your home millions of years ago. And he said, come put your head on this soil and see what you dream.
Yeah, you're putting hair on the back of my neck has gone up. There's no place like home, said Dorothy.
Mm-hmm. And what would you ask of the American people as they try to make sense of this? Is there a genocide? Is there not a genocide? What would you ask of them in this moment?
I would ask of them to just keep listening and keep watching, because your administration is going to do something about it. And that's fundamentally important, because we're not going to fix the country internally. We need an external threat, an external carrot and stick, and only the greatest country in the world, America, can do that.
Why should Americans care? Why should they care what happens in South Africa?
Because South Africa is a Judeo-Christian country that is the greatest springboard into Africa. Africa will have the largest population in the world very soon. Africa will be fundamentally important to the world in 20, 30 years' time. Most of the minerals, metals, commodities, arable land is in Africa. Africa is going to be a defining feature strategically, technologically, militarily, culturally for the world, and America needs to get involved, because you haven't had a foreign policy there. You've left it to Russia and China. South Africa is the way in. Save South Africa, fix South Africa, and get into South Africa, and we'll bring you the rest of Africa.
What do you think has been the cost of America's strategic failure to really engage in Africa?
The future of the world.
What do you mean?
If America is isolationist, if America ignores Africa, China with its Belt and Road initiative, China with its rapacious investing, will control all of the minerals, metals, rare earths that they need. Russia doesn't really need all of that because they've got it all in their own country anyway. But here's a problem. No one mentions this, okay? The greatest threat to Africa is the Islamification of Africa. Radical Islam is moving very quickly through Africa. I'll take one country, Burkina Faso, which, as all your followers will know, the capital is Ouagadougou. That's a joke. Burkina Faso, last generation, was 70% Christian and 30% Muslim. It's now 70% Muslim and 30% Christian. And that Islamification is moving south. And 10 to 15% are radical Islam. It's the greatest threat to Africa. And, unless somebody takes notice and somebody has a look, believe me, Africa is going to be a massive opportunity, but also a massive threat, unless America starts to have a proper foreign policy and get actively involved.
Well, South Africa has a role to play in that, because South Africa has been a money laundering place for Islamic Jihad. It has provided passports. It's provided refuge and safe haven for a lot of these groups. It's important to the supply chains, the logistics chains, the financial chains. And if you look just in Durban, where I grew up, I remember, 15 years ago, walking with a woman who was like a mother to me. And women passed us completely in black, with even a metal guard over their eyes. And my African mother, my Zulu African mother, said to me, "What is this? And where did it come from?"
So Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of England, called them post boxes.
Yes, I think I remember
so
that.
Funny. You got into a lot of trouble for that. Laura, I'm going to have to jump.
Okay.
I'm afraid to say, but
Thank
I will
you,
come
Rob.
down to Fredericksburg. I'm going to be in Texas in July, August, and I will come to Fredericksburg.
Come
but
and
please,
see us, and I'll see if we can
keep the flag
get.
flying.
We'll get Ronnie Jackson and his wife to join us for dinner.
Send him this show.
I will do that. I will definitely send it to him. Thank
Laura,
you so
thank you
much,
very
Rob.
much.
You take care.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.